We've done a podcast on product owner to product manager. We've done a podcast on the different ways you break into product management, including having no experience at all. But one of the pathways, which in my experience is one of the minor pathways that I've seen,
rather unusual,
I haven't encountered too many people, is project managers turned product managers or product owners, I guess. If this was your career path into product management, comment and let us know. We're very interested in talking to you. Double points if you live in the Tampa area.
Right, because you're invited to the podcast.
That's right. That's right. Here we are, Arguing Agile again. Brian Orlando, product manager. Om Patel, enterprise agility coach. I say a different title for you every single time.
I like it.
All right. Om Patel, emperor of the moon.
Enterprise sous chef.
That's right. Enterprise sous chef. Enterprise saucier.
Hey, as long as it's French, it sounds good.
Let's talk through a project manager moving into product management. So I have some concerns on this episode.
Right off the bat, you have some concerns.
I certainly do. I would be concerned with any candidate who is a project manager because maybe you can talk me out of this, but I see it as a different mindset.
That's better. Yeah, it is a different mindset. I can speak because I have served time as a project manager in the past. Mm-hmm. It is a different mindset to come to product from a project management background because project managers primarily are concerned with getting things done on time. Come what may. That's their mandate usually. Whereas
get all the things done, get them all done on time.
Get them done on time. Get everything done. It doesn't matter.
Under budget and on time.
Yeah, that's right. Under budget and on time.
I know how to talk.
Get your bonus.
I know how to talk to project managers. It's on time and it's under budget. Go away.
Exactly. And when it's not, you have a bunch of risks and mitigations to kind of excuse yourself out of that. The mindset for product really centers around the customer, which is not even in the picture for project managers usually. I don't know of many project managers that even speak to actual customers, the end users. Yeah. They don't have, obviously this is part and parcel of working in an agile way, but they don't have frequent touch points with the customer, so they don't get feedback. On the contrary, what they focus on is getting all the requirements up front, what we often call BRUF, big requirements up front, and get them signed off in blood. And then the minute the customer says, wait, I know I said that, but...
Hit them with a change request.
Yeah, hit them with a change request. Jump up and down and go,
that's right.
Yeah, CR1, CR2.
That's right.
It's a different mindset. Need the money.
Change all my deliverables.
Listen, some organizations incent people and reward people based on receivables, right? So more change requests, the better. Mm-hmm. And so in that kind of an environment, the project manager is going to be focused on adhering to those big requirements documents that were signed off.
One of the reasons this is so relevant is we did a podcast on contracts and the Agile principle that basically none of y'all out there are touching on the internet. I could make guesses as to why it's not covered so much in the internet, but the customer collaboration over contract negotiation. This falls in that same category. You have somebody who's used to using the contract to beat people over the head with it. And now we're saying, don't do that anymore. So that is a heck of a gear shift.
Well, that's a complete 180, especially in organizations where, you say, project managers are bonused, et cetera, based on the collectibles, right? Yeah. Here, we're talking about putting the customer in the center. Mm-hmm. That's a huge mind shift. And really, I'm stretching to think, have I ever come across project managers that have made that successfully? I don't think I can come up with any.
I don't know.
I can't come up with anybody who's done that.
Well, maybe by the end of this podcast, we'll find out why there's so few.
Sure.
Or, like I said, maybe some people will show up in the comments and be like, hey, I'm the person you look at. Hello, it's me that you're looking for. Maybe Lionel Richie will show up in the comments. That's what I'm saying right now.
Oh, he's going to be singing over for King Charles' coronation.
Oh, is he? Oh,
yeah. Him and Katy Perry. Good British singers.
Katy Perry. Yeah, good because all the actual British singers
they all declined.
They were all busy.
But they declined.
Yeah, we asked them all.
Yeah. They asked Sir Elton John, and he's like, I'm busy. Anyhow, we digress.
Hasn't he done enough service?
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
He's done a lot of service.
Yeah. He's not on drugs anymore, guys. He's therefore not available.
So with that, let's just say goodbye, Yellow Brick Road. Come back to what we were talking about.
So we can talk through some of the pros, some of the cons in having a project manager as your product manager / product owner. And let's start with the very clear, obvious one. which should be a pro. I don't know if you want to be on the pro side or on the con side at this moment. Let me just throw it out there without context.
Sure.
This person has a lot of project management experience, which directly translates into ops experience. So in the podcast that we did with Melissa Perry's Build Trap, the visualization that we showed, there's tactical things that you have to do as a product manager.
Right.
There's operational things you have to do, which is aligning dates and getting people to do things by a certain date and whatever. And then there's strategic things, so strategic type of that what you do with a roadmap and above the roadmap level, that kind of stuff. Obviously, project manager probably won't have that stuff, but the operational middle, where most product managers usually don't get trained, they'll be able to nail that skill.
I would think so. They have the wiring for that, right? As a project manager, they're used to managing dates. They're used to managing people working to items for those dates, etc. So I think you're right. I think that is a natural fit for project managers coming into product. Mm-hmm. So that would be a pro, I guess, if you're looking to do that. The flip side of that's going to be sometimes you can be too rigid with those things, especially coming from that background. All you're concerned about is making that date or those dates, right? And to a certain degree, you need more. You need more empathy with the customer, right? And figure out why those dates are missed. Right. And sometimes just say it's okay if they're missed, if that's for the right reasons.
Yeah, well, lining up dates, basically operating, like that's not really the majority of your role anymore. Yeah. Even if I were to show I guess I talked about it so much I have to show the build trap. I think that's probably big enough. Can I go like a little bit bigger? Nope, sorry, we don't have the technology. Okay, well, whatever. So like you see here, like the tactical, operations, strategic, but like the operations, the green part is really, it's a tiny sliver until you get to the director of product, right? Where like 50%, well, probably like by this, it's more than 50%, but basically around 50% is all operations lining things up. And that does make sense when you have a staff under you that you're doing a lot of lining things up on their behalf. But, moving into like, even if you move directly into product manager, or I don't know, somehow you move directly into senior product manager, you see here it's about the same amount. 20%, maybe 15, 18%, something like that.
Yeah, it's a small amount.
I guess it's an advantage, but it's like a kind of a negligible advantage, maybe.
Yeah, it's not one of the big ones.
Okay, well maybe we move on to an actual larger one. Like a pro on our list would be, you have a lot of experience with stakeholder management, which does directly translate into product management.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it translates, you say almost one-on-one, right? Because you're still managing stakeholders. Mm-hmm. Not a lot changes there, I think, from skill set perspective, right? You need the communication skills. You need to figure out who needs to know what, when, how, etc. Sure. And that doesn't change. So yeah, that's a big plus for somebody from a project background coming in, because they don't have to learn anything new. They can apply what they know and still be effective at managing stakeholders.
Well, you went to the second point of where I was going to go, is it's communication skill. I would think that my project managers, I would hope, I don't know, maybe this is not true, but I would think that my project managers have a bit more polish and a bit more finesse and a bit more ability in their communication skill than anybody that came up. Like, for example, if someone came up through development and now they're a product manager, I expect they would be a bit more raw on their communication and follow-up skills and the way they bring up sensitive things. And like you may be talking to a team that's stressed or whatever, or maybe they've missed a deadline and now you have to kind of confront them about it, but you still need stuff out of them, so you can't be burning bridges. There's a way to bring that up. So the stakeholder management and communication I see as separate topics.
They are separate topics. I think they're somewhat related because you communicate with stakeholders, but yes, they are separate. I think to the communications management standpoint, yes, somebody coming up through the development side of the house, they may not be as polished. They may not come in with the mindset of raising issues and then raising potential solutions, perhaps, right? Yeah. Putting that in that light. Yeah. They may be direct in some cases. Right. That's possible too, because developers like to be very direct. Right. Just because of the nature of who they are, right? Project managers, on the other hand, I think they vary. Some project managers that I've come across, they're very good at communicating and taking those absolute hard numerical concepts and putting them in terms that are, let's just say, more palatable for the stakeholders.
Some of them.
Yeah, some of them. Some of them, on the other hand,
I was gonna say,
are just direct,
yeah,
right?
I was gonna say I'll go
No filter people.
I'll go with you on this up until a point, because I've worked with some project managers that woo boy, you would think they started with the they were born in a barn. I don't know what you would think. I have no idea. Like,
Yeah, they tend to be very direct sometimes, and no filter. Like, it doesn't matter who's there.
Where does influence live? Does it live under stakeholder management or under communication or both? Like, because like you, as a product manager, you have to build influence. As a project manager, this is going to be real confusing for me to keep using these two terms. As a project manager, you still do have to influence. I mean, you don't have direct control of, I guess, things that are outside of your sphere. Vendors, stuff like that. Maybe it's not a great argument because they kind of are in your control.
I think there is an argument to be made there. A project manager has more authority by virtue of the position, I suppose, than a product manager might. So to that end, they have to build their influence, right? They have to make sure that their alliances are brought up and all that. I don't know. I think you can go either way on this, but project managers also need to do that, especially if they're new to the project, to the firm or company, or just new to the team. They still have to do that.
There's one category that I actually want to hit that I think is like all these we kind of talked about both sides, right? I think there's a big advantage with this last category, which is expanded awareness of like running a business. I think of any product manager that I've worked with, or even me, like if someone came to me and said, all right, Brian, I want you to launch this new software module that does whatever, and I want to come up with a budget of how much it's going to cost and milestones of how long it's going to take, generally speaking. They don't have to be accurate, but just generally speaking, in like stub it all out so I can do my budget for next year, because whatever, maybe this is reality that we're living in. People do yearly budgets and stuff like that. And they're asking me to basically set a lot of this stuff up from scratch. Someone who's got the PMP certification, like they've done this stuff on paper. But I could do it just because I have the experience. Right. But there's a certain way that a project manager would walk through that kind of stuff, and then work with the business leaders, people that have budget and stuff like that, and move things along. So I think this is kind of the advantage that point goes into the project manager category on this one.
Yeah, Initially, I concur with you there, because project managers typically do work out budgets, etc., not just on paper, right? They do that in the software too. So they have the chops to figure all that out, make projections, etc. That part is fine, and those aren't necessarily really challenging skills that people can't learn. Yeah. But here's where I want to go the other way and say they're going to be just simply focused on people as resources, come up with budgets. They're not going to be worried about, or concerned, I should not worried, concerned about coming up with budgets by product features, for example, right? They don't have that wiring. They don't think about it that way. Who's going to be building it? How many people are working here? For how long? What's their rate? What are their rates? Because that's what they've been doing, right? As a project manager. So yes, it's an advantage, but also it can be a disadvantage if they're not willing to quickly adapt and think about things. From a budgeting perspective, right? Think about things from a product point of view.
So everything up until this point was things that I think might be advantages that project managers coming in might have on their side. So we kind of talked about both. Now we'll go into the category of things that I think are like pretty strictly disadvantages, and we can kind of talk through both sides of each one of those. And I want to pivot now because you just brought up the first one that I think is a disadvantage, which is that they've never been asked to do product research and basically start delivering something and start delivering with this large cloud of ambiguity or all these unknowns, to just say, hey, don't worry about a plan, just start delivering, and you can use some discovery methods to find your way where you're going once you're delivering, but I need you delivering first. So that living in a world of, it could be, if you're setting up a product from the ground up, it could be living in a world of total ambiguity as you search your way through. That research-based approach, I think that is working against them. That scientific approach of like, try something, get some feedback, change your methods, do something else. Like, I think that's working against their mindset, basically.
Yeah, I concur with that. It is working against them. They're used to having more certainty, having lines on a Gantt chart that they can say, how long is it going to take? They oftentimes dictate that if they do speak with their team members. They'll add their own padding on that, all of that stuff. So, yeah, you're right. They don't have this idea of being comfortable with the unknown, right? Or with ambiguity. So, with uncertainty, right? So, yeah, that's a big disadvantage in a project manager's camp, I guess.
I didn't even think about padding estimates. It's been so long that I've been out of the world of dealing with project managers that I completely forgot that everybody pads their estimates. You know what I mean? But by some amount, like up or down, it doesn't really matter. But there is padding built in, and it's been so many years where I've been giving, I guess, quote, clean estimates at like the velocity or the throughput or the flow or whatever we're using, cycle time, lead time, like they are what they are. Like there's no reason to pad that stuff down.
You can't, right? These are lagging indicators, so you can't really pad them.
Right.
But that doesn't exist in the project management world so much. So what they do is build in that stuff and they formalize it, right? Often they call them feeding buffers. This task feeds this task and all this stuff in the middle. It can flex either way, so we're going to pad it, basically. Right. But I do want to talk about, okay, so we're flip-flopping, or I am at least. I want to talk about one.
There's no rules here.
There's no rules here. The only rules are no rules. I do want to talk about one which is an advantage, again, for the project management camp, which is risk management, right? So they are well-versed in identifying risks and then putting them in that category of are they accepted? Are they mitigated, etc.? Are they transferred? Things like that. Especially if you have vendors and you have a risk on them, you put the risk on the vendor, thus transferring the risk. It's still a risk. The project managers are very good at that. So I think that's an advantage. I think people not from that background may have to pick up those skills.
Maybe. Let's. I have the natural impulse to push back on this one, but I don't know if that's just me naturally being a pain or if I actually am detecting something that I want to talk about. I will say the majority of feature team product managers, probably yes, you'll have an advantage over them. Like the people that are fed work, people in feature factories, stuff like that, you might have an advantage over them. But the product managers who find their way forward through continuous discovery, I'm not sure this is the same skill. So where it sounds like it's the same skill is, hey, when we're in this discovery phase, we should be working through the business viability and the usability and all the business risks that can come up when you decide to work on something.
2 very boring minutes later.
I told a story which may or may not survive past the editing. The intent of the story was to say, knocking down business risk, saying, hey, if we use these shaky tools or if we use these sketchy providers, I don't know why everyone's sketchy. They may not be stable. Oh, we might invest with this partner business, and then they might be out of business 6 months from now. So all that stuff is the product manager's job. Is what you're saying that the project manager is used to doing stuff like that, so they have an advantage? Is that where you're going?
No, project managers don't typically think about market and things like that, right? They're thinking more about what they call quote unquote resource risk, schedule risk, vendor risk,
we might have
those
missed
sorts
something.
of things.
So less likely that we have missed a piece of the process or something that we
exactly. So it's not a wider remit to think about from a business perspective.
I mean, that's still an advantage.
It is, but it's not a massive advantage. Those skills can be learned. It's not too big, but it is there. I think it's a palpable advantage.
I agree with all that. I kind of shuffle it back into like being good or thorough at operations, being detail oriented with operations in mind, that kind of stuff. It's not exactly the same as what I think of as risk mitigation in terms of my risk. Like I'm going to build a feature and nobody's going to use it when I put it out there. That's a risk.
That's product think, right?
Yeah.
They don't bring that necessarily because they're project based. So they think about it from the perspective of delivery. They think about delivery risks, right? Is something going to be delayed? Is something slipping so that it would impact something else upon which that which is slipping is dependent? Things like that.
Right.
It's not a huge advantage or a disadvantage. Probably a disadvantage. I said, hang on, I'm just thinking through this now. Well, it's a bigger disadvantage than it is an advantage now because they don't have the business perspective.
Well, where I was going before, like my brain became my brain and sidetracked myself. Where I was going was, I'm already forgetting. Oh, this might lead to like feature factory type of thing, or like we have to do all of feature XYZ, Right. You know what I mean? It might lead to that kind of like, well, I made the plan to do all of this. I don't want to leave the last 2 tasks open, even though I've got everyone in the business agrees that there are higher priorities. Like, why are you still working on that? Haven't you delivered enough? You know what I mean? That kind of, I don't even know really what I'm saying.
No, I think you're right.
They don't know when to draw the line, you know?
Well, any deviation from a plan, I suppose, right? Any deviation
Right,
from
yeah.
a plan, they're going to see that as, this is not good. So let's just come back to the original plan, even though there's merit in not doing that.
Well,
right?
this goes directly into our next point on here, which is they're going to have a significant mindset shift to operate in this new paradigm. Ooh, I don't get to say the word paradigm often on the podcast. That was fun. But seriously, they had like the idea of like, well, we planned 8 stories to deliver this epic, and we delivered 5 of the stories. There's still 3 out there, but the customers tells us like, we love it the way it is. Like we don't like those other things would be great, but we love it like this. And you're looking at what the customer is telling you, and you're also looking at the things that you need to jump to next, the value you have to jump to next, and you're saying, you know what, all this stuff I need to jump to next is like way more valuable than these other little button-up type of tasks. Again, assuming we're not talking about technical debt or whatever, all things being equal.
Right.
And you'll say, you know what, like maybe I'll move these way down the backlog, and if we have like time to pick up like little onesie-twosie things, maybe we'll pick it up in the future. But you're basically saying, yes, we did plan this. Yes, we always intended to do it, but now that we're kind of here and the customer is real happy with the solution, like I think there's more value somewhere else, and then just pivoting.
Yeah, I certainly agree. The trouble with paradigms is shift happens.
It's tough to throw away work that you planned.
It is tough because you feel like you're somehow underperforming, right? And that mind shift change, it's hard. It's hard for people that aren't coming from a product background, or at least product orientation, right? To say, well, good enough's good enough.
Yeah.
There's something else that we'd rather be working on next, as opposed to I made a plan. We all made a plan. We all agreed to it.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have to execute the plan, those two things don't really sit well together. And people coming from a project background sometimes do struggle with that.
You want to hear my insidious follow-up to what you just said? Like we talked in the previous podcast about blame.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be very concerned if I hired somebody like this to work with me or to be one of my peers. I would be very concerned about their influence through the organization, stakeholder management, stuff like that, because a lot of project managers I've worked with, could just be my experience. So I'm just want to get that little caveat, a little star, a little asterisk out there to say, you know, something doesn't go the way that we plan or whatever, and these people might be out there not saying what did we learn from this experience that didn't go the way we expected it to go, and rather say everyone would have succeeded if it wasn't for those darn kids or whatever. Like my evil plan would have succeeded if it wasn't for you darn kids, right?
Yeah. So that whole perspective of looking at deviations from the plan and then really looking at blame, right? Blame and or some sort of penalization of people that, you know, somehow underperformed, as opposed to welcome those changing requirements, right? That is completely, I think, contrary to the ethos of a project manager. They have to try hard, I think, to get over that.
Yeah. Like, what happens if you have teams that, like, when you're a project manager and you have teams that miss their deliverables, and you have vendors that miss their deliverables, and let's say that you're a project manager, and I've seen project managers at shops that actually own no development teams. They're going to offshore developers and then offshore testers and then other teams to receive it that are like customer teams, UAT customer teams to receive. So they're truly are like everyone's mercenaries working for the project manager at that point. I've been in those organizations too. It's a super scary way to run a business, but also like if somebody misses a deadline and everything shifts, like how do you not like you're going to do the 5 whys, but they're always going to lead back to pointing at people. To be like, well, the 5 whys. We failed because this wasn't hit. Why wasn't it hit? No, it wasn't hit because this thing didn't turn out the way we planned. Well, why didn't it turn out plan? Oh, because Ohm screwed up.
Ultimately,
Right?
it all comes down to a person or people, and a project manager's kind of MO is going to be, like I said, penalize people, right? So it may be that these people are not performing,
Right.
so they write them up or they get rid of them in the worst case scenarios. So I think that is a real risk from a project manager coming into this realm. It's hard to embrace this idea that everybody tried the best they could given the direction that you gave.
Sure.
Now it still comes back maybe to you, right? Because you gave the direction. But you should treat that as a discovery, right? This is what we did. Here's how we failed. Let's get up, dust ourselves off, move on, right?
Yeah.
We learn something from
Yeah.
that. So that's hard. That's
Well,
hard from a project manager's point of view.
Well, the project manager is not really providing direction in terms of leadership and vision.
No.
They're, quite honestly, I don't really know what they're providing direction with regard to the plan, I guess. But the why are we doing this? Like, I don't know if a project manager, probably the good ones, they do know the why. They do understand it. They've made it their business to know the why. But I can think of a lot of project managers I've interfaced with in my career that they didn't care why. Go talk to this person if you want to know why. That's not my job.
Yep. Yeah, and those are different skill sets again,
Yeah.
you know. And I don't know if these are easy to learn because you're wired that way. If you've been working in project management for a number of years, you're wired that way. And for you to suddenly leave that and pivot, that's going to be tough.
Well, again, that goes back to the main category we're talking about now is mindset. Like it might require a mindset. Like go to our episode 100 where we had Ed in here for Carol Dweck's mindset and listen to that podcast or watch it, I guess, and listen to that podcast because or if you don't want to listen to that podcast, that's okay. Like read or download the audiobook or whatever for Carol Dweck's mindset because that might key you in right there of I've got some behaviors that are set in concrete that I've realized that I now believe that they're set in concrete, that I realize that like to be successful in this new role, I probably should think about changing. This is the same way.
Yeah, it really is. Maybe we'll be kind and provide a link in the section below to the...
I've been pretty good at that the last couple podcasts in the editing where I'm like, I even leave the little part in where I'm like, I'll put a link or I'll just cut it out if I'm lazy. I even leave that in because I think it's hilarious. I don't care if anyone thinks it's not hilarious. I think it's funny. We touched on leadership there in that last bullet point. Leadership versus management. And let me throw this one out there as something I think is in a con in a drawback is the project manager is squarely in the management category and the product manager is squarely in the leadership category. And I don't think they work not being in those categories. I don't think you can have a product manager who is a manager, quote manager, from the management like perspective of manager. I guess unless you're in a feature factory, I guess.
Yeah, as I say, there is some context there as well, right? So overall, I'd concur with that, but I'm sure you can find edge cases in either scenarios, sure. Right? But I think the first point you made about project managers being management as opposed to leaders is probably pretty accurate. I would say you don't gain leadership skills in that sense. What you gain is skills that are real in nature. You're actually demanding things from people. Sure. Whereas a leader doesn't do that, right? A leader empowers people and sets them up for success and then gets out of the way. Right. That's not necessarily true of most project managers. Now, some are very good. They've taken the time and trouble to hone those skills and they're very good. But for the most part, I don't think you're going to find that. The other side of the coin, product folks being more leadership oriented people. Yeah. I could say, again, the same thing. Majority of the time, you're probably right. But you could have some rookies that come up and possibly struggle to be leaders unless they've acted in a leadership capacity elsewhere or be outside of this domain, right?
Oh, I was going to say, if you're going to force me into the con on this one for like against product managers in the category they should be good at, all of the product managers who, you know, if it's the wake up at 10 o'clock and take the bus into work or like the private bus and have their juices and sit on the rooftop bar until noon and do exactly 15 minutes of work or whatever, like these people like advertising their life at Meta or Facebook or whatever. The people that I think in product management that are more like managers are the people that are kind of separated directly from their team. They don't do discovery with their team. They don't do, the writings, the stories, and breaking work down and talking through work with their team. They sit with an engineering manager or somebody like that, and then they talk to them, and then the engineering manager goes and plays buffer to the team, and or maybe the engineering manager works with an offshore team to punch stuff out, and then the engineering manager presents the work back to the product manager. So like in that instance, you're kind of like a manager in that.
You really are. You're really not leading from the front in that case, right? You're not with your teams. You're not with the customer in that example. Yeah. So what are you at that point? You're not really a leader at that point, right? And I'd argue you're probably closer at that stage to becoming but closer to that person, which the project manager would be in that same role. Yeah. Because even though you came from different backgrounds, you're there. You're right there in management squarely. Right. So yeah, I agree with that.
This doesn't really fit into any of the categories, so I'm going to bring it up here right at the end of talking about leadership. Like, there's a whole marketing component and like a growth component of any product manager. Like when your product is in growth mode, as opposed to your product being in sustain mode or sunset mode, right? When your product is in growth mode, there's a set of activities that maybe a project manager would find that they've never really been exposed to. Like, for example, trying to experiment to get retention or experiment to get, acquisition of customers and stuff like that. It's almost like a marketing side to the job role that maybe they've never had to do before, drumming up excitement and drumming up the support outside of the business.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So community building aspect as well.
Yeah. So project managers, they really haven't been exposed in that way to potential customers and so forth. Work has been given to them, taken to them, I guess. So the other way is, you go figure out, is there a market, right? How big is it? Is there an appetite? Yeah. But fundamentally, I think the divide, if you will, perhaps that's a strong word, maybe not. The divide is project managers know about a project lifecycle. They don't know about a product lifecycle.
Sure, right.
Right? Yeah. Most product folk know about obviously the product lifecycle, and you could argue that it's not a stretch for them to get to grips with a project lifecycle because it dovetails in with the product lifecycle anyway. So that I think is a nuance there between the two roles.
I'm going to jump to the last category, which is when people tell me, now we're not talking about project managers, we're talking about pretty much anyone. When people tell me they want to be a product manager, I tell them there's really only two ways to enter. You start with product management experience and the understanding of how to build products and how to do discovery and stuff like that. Or you start with being an expert in a domain. And then you go learn how to build great products and interface with development teams and work through requirements, stuff like that. But you have to have one or the other to get picked up as a product manager. But starting with neither of those, neither understanding how to build products, like you've never been on with or on development teams, and not understanding and being an expert in a business domain, you're really starting way behind. And this is probably the biggest thing. I saved it for last because this is probably the biggest thing in my opinion, and probably a lot of other product managers that would listen to this would probably label this as the number one thing, is if you don't have either side of this equation, it's going to be very difficult to break through.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely true. Those are the primary pathways into, I think, this profession, right? If you don't have those two, like you said, you come in, you don't know the domain, right? You don't have that mindset of experimentation, etc. How do you break in? I'm just wondering now, kind of as we're talking through this, is there maybe an ancillary pathway here, which is you work as a product owner, you could come from the development side of the, so at least you still have development type of background and the domain. So I guess it's the same thing. Now, I do want to talk about, we say domain, but it doesn't have to be your specific product domain necessarily. What I'm saying is, if you know about what products are, how to build those, you could relate that experience with another product. So it doesn't have to be the same thing. Like you worked in, let's say, a cosmetic company, right, to get away from software for a bit. You could still, those skills are relatable to any other industry. You could go to a detergent manufacturer or whatever, clothing company. These are all products. So if you have a product orientation, product mindset, you can apply those skills in any of these. I'm calling them domains now. So I think those are relatable skills. But if you didn't have that,
well, what are those skills before we move off of this topic? I think those skills are like a good feeling about like vertical slicing, like breaking work down, like what a story might be, how to kind of phrase or reword like air quotes requirements. You know what I mean? BA type of skills, like a lot of that kind of stuff. Also, like if you're gonna get past that to say like working with technology to actually implement things like that could be it too. Like a lot of the things that I ascribe to product management, or even if we get out of the technical domain and we just back up a second, the empiricism about I'm going to try something, I'm going to see the results, I'm going to act on the results, change my way, go forward. Even if you don't even have a software product, and we're just trying to do something to find the way that you can still apply a lot of that product thinking, that the continuous discovery type of thinking. But then I load on top of that with product management skill. When I say product management skill, I'm loading down all the business analysis skill set and the product development skill set, but the basics of like, why are tests important? What is the difference between tests? What is a unit test? What's an integration test? You know what I mean? Where should you apply those? How much time should you put in? Or what phase is your product in? Is it in sunset? Is it in whatever? I know I'm rambling now, but
no, all of those are essential skills,
that's
really.
Different. That's different than completely understanding a business in and out.
Right,
You know,
right. So those are
section,
relatable too, right? In your example, they were software, but yeah, they're relatable too. This idea of having that experimentation mindset, right? And also the idea of empathizing with the customer, their needs, even concepts like personas, for instance, right? You know, who are you building it for? And then figuring out why. What are their needs? How do they use your product? When do they use your product? All of those things. Those skills are relatable, I believe, from one product to a completely different product, right? It's still a product. So if you didn't have those, and you didn't come from a narrow focus, right? So the domain in which you're working, technical domain perhaps. If you didn't have those two, you'd be out at sea pretty much.
I almost wonder what if there's a way to boil. When I say domain expertise, like that might go over some people's heads. I mean, it's like if I worked as a accountant for 10 years, right, doing taxes, keeping people's books, stuff like that, and then I move into telling people how to write accounting software, I'm going to have a deep expertise. When I talk, it's going to be from direct experience, and I'm going to be able to go super deep into nuance when questioned. Now, that doesn't excuse that I still need to be interviewing users and stuff like that, but there is a deep empathy for the users that otherwise would be impossible to replicate.
And yeah, I agree. And that would have a direct bearing on your ability to synthesize a product, right?
And to navigate value, I think.
Exactly. Yes, I agree. That's right. Yeah, that's very true. So what do you think about this idea that, you know, somebody from a brand newly minted MBA in marketing comes out and gets installed as a product manager in a company? How does somebody like that fare with, yes, they're armed with an MBA, but they don't have domain knowledge. They don't have the product orientation, as I call it, in their mind. How do they fare in the industry? I've actually seen one case of this in real life years and years ago. I can talk about this. I was a Z of a food business, and the marketing person was a 27-year-old newly minted Stanford MBA. This went out for about 6 months, and then he was gone. Some of the direction that we were receiving had us scratching our heads, thinking, does this person really know what we're doing, who our customers are? So that's just one example. N equals 1, I get it. But, you know, I think people will fail if they don't have one or the other, as we started with that. You need one or the other. And I think most of the time, I'd say I'd lean on the side of having that product mindset is being more important than having specific niche domain knowledge, because that can be acquired, or you can work with people that have that, right? But if you're a product person and you don't have that product mindset, how are you going to succeed? I don't know.
Well, I mean, there we go. You just put the capstone on the end of our doctoral dissertation. I mean, we're not Stanford MBAs or anything, but
Hey, but if you can, if you can think of other ways to succeed as a product person from different backgrounds, do let us know.
Oh, I thought you were going to say if you're a Stanford MBA, please let us know.
Yeah, that too.